Welcome, everybody, to season 3 of the Projectworks podcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Fabulous to see so many people live online. Projectworks podcast. This is a conversation and community for high growth consulting leaders about the stuff that's keeping us up at night. My name is Dominique Grinnell. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at Projectworks. And joining me, as always, is Mark Ortung, our CEO. Hi, Mark. Welcome back to season 3.
Thank you. I'm excited for this one.
Me too. Very excited. How have things been going for you in between seasons? Have you been
Good.
busy?
Yeah, busy as usual. Doug and I, as you know, wrote a book and we got it sort of
Yeah.
relaunched with Entreshot Press.
Great.
And so that means, among other things, it is now on Amazon, which it was not previously. So we're excited
Awesome.
about that. Yeah, so we can throw a link in the chat at some point here.
Great. Yes,
Yeah.
fantastic. Be great to throw that in. I think Jacob from our marketing team who's online will throw that into the chat. That'll be great to see. And for this season, we're going all in on AI. I mean, everyone's talking about it. It's everywhere. AI, I'm sure, is on a lot of people's minds, especially if you're logging into this podcast. But I think for us, we are really ambitious about what this means for consulting firms. That's what our focus is, and we want to really make sure that we're thinking about that in that context. So before we kick off things, as always, we're going to roll with a poll. So really would love to get a sense of how everybody is thinking about it. And the question on our poll today is, how confident are you that AI is making your firm grow faster or more profitably? So a couple of options on there. So it'd be good to get a feel across that. Of what people are doing. And I think those are probably the right two, Mark. Would you say growing fast and profitable? I mean, that
Yeah,
there's an AI might be different, but that's not a big change of what's keeping us up at night.
that is the goal, right? So yeah, I'm really curious to see where people land on this. Are they feeling like it's working or not seeing the results yet? So very curious.
And I think that also identifies a little bit of the areas that we'll talk through with AI or in essentially any technology developments. Is this going to help me move faster? So what I want to do, just get there faster. Is this going to make me more money? Is this going to be able to mean that I can deliver in a more cost effective way? Um, I think, AI aside, that's probably what we're all looking for to find those things there. And that's our poll up. Great. That's pretty cool. So we had not confident at all, slightly confident, quite confident, and very confident. It looks like most people are falling into the slightly confident brackets
Hmm.
uh, at 43%. A nice split there. It's sort of like a 2020 and you're quite or not at all. And then a few people there that are feeling very confident, which is awesome to see. I think it would mean that, yeah, I mean, I'm making an assumption there, but I think maybe very confident means you've already got a few tactics in play. So you've already got some initiatives rolling out that you have some confidence in. But to set the scene a bit here, if you run a consulting firm, you've probably spent the last year or longer hearing that AI is going to change everything we do. And the reality, though, is that many firms cannot actually, at this stage, point to how that's going to really increase their growth or profitability because of their AI investment. I think even those that have some good initiatives running, still a little bit murky there to be able to see what the end result, as often is with emerging technology. And that gap is what this season's really about. We want to explore what an AI era consulting firm looks like, including where AI can genuinely help and talking about those metrics to measure. Really putting that down and at a base level is what part of your consultancy should you really be focusing on? What metrics are going to those help move? We've got some slides which we're going to talk through today, but before we bring that up, Mark, how are you feeling about this as a topic this season?
I think it's awesome. I mean, if everyone's probably experiencing what I am, which is just this sort of fire hose of information and everybody's got to take, and it's sort of hard to avoid hearing about it and hearing what everybody thinks it's going to do. So I'm excited to, number one, to like jump into that mess and try to make sense out of it. And number two, to like use sort of what outcomes can we get out of it and what value can we get from it, and really use that as the guide to figure out what's important, what makes sense, what should we do more of, and what should we ignore. And with that much noise, there's probably a lot to ignore and a few things to really dive into.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much noise about that and so many opportunities. I think a big point is really taking a step back and thinking what are the places that it would make the most impact. Maybe not, or could sometimes be, but sometimes the splashiest impact across there. Like, is it that we're really going to focus on AI internal? What are our customers saying? All of these questions sort of turn that on its head. So it'd be good to run this through. So building the AI era consulting firm. This is a really good slide we decided we would like to start with, because I'm a believer that at the moment there's a lot of noise of where we're going to put AI in different places, but at our core, we are still consulting firms. That's what's happening here. That's what we're serving as a community, and that's at a core. So it's important to sort of come back to what are the core areas of a consulting firm now, and potentially where AI could fit into that.
Yeah, and I think this was how we started last season, right? We kind of got into this maturity model. I think the graphic's slightly different, but it's basically the same model. And I think at the end of the day, you're spending a lot of your energy trying to grow your firm and a lot of energy trying to operate it effectively so that all that great work that you sold actually generates good margin, great happy clients that leads to more work. And these things are kind of they're still true. You still need to do all these things. So hopefully AI gives us a tool set to do them more efficiently, more quickly, in a way that delights our clients more. But at the end of the day, you still need to operate in this way and measure yourself in this way. I think it's a great way, kind of great base to start from.
Agree. And I think also with those two parts, sometimes we had last season that people were stronger in some areas than others. So that's an important context to put on that. With AI, how fast you can move in areas may potentially mean how far, be defined by how strong you were in the first place in those sections or areas of a business to run. But to set the scene, we want to talk about, AI is reshaping productivity, but we know this isn't the first time this has happened, right? This is not the first tech wave or a new way of thinking about things. I'm sure people have seen these sorts of timelines before, but we always think it's useful to start from this point of view. And depending on your age and stage on this podcast right now, might be how much you're sort of laughing or identifying with some of these, these dates and topics.
Yeah, I don't know if we have anybody that knows about factory electrification. Hopefully not on this podcast, but at least a few people were around in the 80s. And not to date myself too much, but I was in college and I had a job at this place called SRI, which was related to Stanford. And I was doing this radio physics thing, which I barely understood. But down the hall, I didn't understand it at the time. There were these guys building something called the DARPANET, and it was basically the internet. So I really should have walked down the hall and just somehow inserted myself into what they were doing, because I could have had a really interesting view of it in the late 80s. Not quite 83, but closer to 90. But yeah, it was just getting going. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. And we were talking the other day about cloud-based software. I feel like I was telling, or, working in tech, for years about cloud. People were just, it felt very, I think there was a lot of fear around that. What do you mean? Where is my information? For a long time working in sort of government pieces as well, there were very high protection around where that government, cloud storage would be there. And now, there's lots of overseas companies, AWS, that have dominated that market. People have less fear around where their information is kept. It's an interesting one of when you sort of look at that. And same with mobile tech dominance. I mean, one of my first roles out of university was, teaching people about how to set up data on their phones. That was it. And that was years before the iPhone came out. It just blew people's minds that they could have, an email on their phone. It was wild. So we're now, that's,
Yeah.
old hat. So, and it really, those core things, which seem actually not that long ago, absolutely transformed the way we did business. But I think what we're all feeling, and I really do feel like I can talk for most of us, is the speed of how quickly this is happening now. When I think about that cloud-based, I feel like that was a good decade of people getting their head around that, where the speed of us talking about AI to now feeling like we're talking to peers or other businesses that seem really far ahead in that space has been what has felt like months. this year and that bounce.
Yeah. Yeah, you can kind of see the gap between these keeps getting smaller and smaller and the world is moving faster. And I think that we all feel that just how
Yeah.
quickly this thing has come up from when ChatGPT first popped up in 23 to now everybody really working on agentic stuff and it's even in that relatively short period of time, it's come just a really long way. So yeah, it's fun to see.
I agree. And I think you articulate very well there. I think some people, have spoken a lot about the difference between a chat to an agent to people really transforming their business. So it's a quick move to people, have been moving really fast in that space.
Yeah. This is we wanted to dive into that electrification just a little bit because it's a case study that is kind of fun in the way it seems to have this parallel to the way things are happening with AI, which you wouldn't necessarily think. So first, a quick shout out to these two guys you can see at the bottom, Azim Azhar and Nathan Warren have a Substack called The Exponential View. That's where we got this from. So shout out to them. Really interesting content. So they kind of talk about how when electricity began to get rolled out, how it played to in the world of the factory. And so stage one was everybody got a light bulb, right? And I think this is like 2023 ChatGPT, like everybody lit up their workstation. It didn't really change much. It got a little bit higher quality, maybe. Maybe each person got a little bit faster or a little bit safer because their workstation was lit up, but that's about it. And we'll show you some pictures in a second here. But then they went to this idea of the group drive. So they had these mechanical machines and they would share as a work group the power that would make their machines go. And so they were more productive than with the light bulb, but they really had not transformed how they work. And then the last piece, the stage three, was when you can think of like Ford rebuilding the assembly line as one of the versions of that, and then everybody kind of followed. But having the power come to each step along a business process and really streamlining the process first and then applying the technology to it. So if you go to the next slide, just some great photos. The one on the left is this idea of the group drive. So look at that crazy factory, right? Like they were sharing the electricity ran a motor, which then had all these belts that went to everybody in the work group. So they were like one motor running all of their machines at their little workstations. And the one on the right just seems almost like more relaxing, more zen to just even look at that because it's like this clear, like they figured out what they're building, in what order, and how it should flow. And they each have a power tool that can help them do their single step in the process. And I think the analogy we're drawing here is that's kind of how AI is being. A lot of us are chatting with a chatbot, we're doing better search, we're getting more interesting answers, but that's a little bit like turning on the light bulb. And so a lot of people then move to small work groups working together and collaborating. And our kind of assertion here or hypothesis here is you're kind of like the people with all the crazy belts sitting around a desk and you've gotten more productive, but we think there's a lot more to go, which is really deeply understanding the business processes and figuring out which pieces can be fully automated or partially automated as you go and really get the humans working on the more challenging, more creative, more interesting steps along the way. So we thought that was kind of a fun analogy to think about for how to apply AI into whatever client context you're working in. So
And
yeah,
oh no, you go, Mark. You go.
I was gonna say internally we debate, is this a Darwin moment or is it a Pollyanna moment? And there's definitely this is one of those technology shifts that is very easy for a company with an established franchise. So they've got a business that's really great. They've got a big customer base. They build all kinds of things into their company to protect that franchise. And quite often in history, those things that protect the franchise stop them from getting on the next wave, even though many of these companies, you'll have seen Kodak had invented the digital camera, Xerox had Xerox PARC, which developed most of the technology that was in the early Apple computers. So it's not that they were not creative or not smart enough, they just didn't have the right structures in place to take advantage of the new technology. There's a book that I really like by a guy by the name of Safi Bakal that talks about, it's called Loon Shots, Loon loon shots, like the bird. And he's got a really interesting approach. He kind of applies physics to large organizations and how you can divide up your franchise from your creative group, and sort of talks about soldiers in the franchise who really have to keep things moving, and then a bunch of artists that are doing whatever's new and creative, and how you can set up structures to sort of protect them. And get into the next slide, which is, out of this, there usually are winners, right? So when you look at early 2000s or maybe 2008, who came out of those sort of, there's the dot-com crash and then the global financial crisis. Out of both of those, a lot of great companies emerged and a lot of companies sort of reinvented themselves. So like Nintendo's a great example. Had been around a long time, but really came into their own, I think, in the last decade or two as they took advantage of some of these trends. So, yeah, just great to see.
Yeah, agree. It's a good reminder that there's always opportunities to change and be out there. And I think I really like that idea when you've described that before about the soldiers and the protection of revenue. And I think that's sort of a reflection there sometimes as you're moving forward in your business, like in terms of like what might your resistance be to putting in a new project or a new opportunity? Is it, that you are trying to protect something that potentially that might not be the right move? And so this really does move this into this question: what does healthy growth and profitability look like in the AI area and era? And this is the murky piece. I think it's sort of like there's opportunity. What do we roll out? But what are the metrics? What should I be expecting to be able to do? And what might I be pointing the North Star towards for my consulting firm? And this is a slide that we want to spend a little bit of time on about that scaling that revenue per employee with AI. Mark, do you want to talk to that a little bit as a measure, the revenue per employee, and why that's sort of right up the top in that bright green line?
Yeah, we're starting out with a kind of a bold, like putting a stake in the ground here. This is we think the metric that helps you understand productivity the best. So it's really at its core, how productive is your team being? So did you turn on the light bulb, or have you figured out your business process and given everybody the right tools to do their piece of it? And we think the most core measurement of that is revenue per employee. So that's a stake in the ground we're making. Then we are saying, if you think about a maturity model, in this case, we've got four levels. As you know, we can go into more detail than just those four, but at the highest level, thinking about four levels of maturity along the way, we think each of them can incrementally improve the productivity of your team and what you can accomplish for your clients. So you can think about getting your firm's data in order can give you some productivity gains. Um, Getting AI across the whole firm and really directing it can give you a little bit more gain. Um, Really getting it to work for you in a proactive, agentic way, we think can give you quite a big gain. And then there's sort of a whole set of things you need to do to be an AI native firm, much of which comes back to mapping out your business processes, being super clear about where in those business processes can I just automate things. So for one example, you might think about everybody has to interview new potential candidates for an opening in your firm. And there's probably a set of 8 or 10 things you need to do. So you've got to, as the interviewer, you got to figure out what are your questions, look at their background. And many of these things probably can just be done for you. There's, writing up the notes after the interview. And so a lot of these pieces you can start to think about in any given process. Can it be fully automated? Can it be partially automated? My note taker can give me the notes and the takeaways. I can just do a quick edit if I don't fully agree. But hopefully that's going to take me a minute or two instead of 10 or 15 after the interview. So we can get in, and we're going to kind of spend a lot of time this season on all of this, and get hopefully the community to help us unpack this and figure out if we've got this in the right order and the right pieces to it. And then I'd say one other thing that we are putting on out there is we think you can do this in 2 years. We kind of put, roughly 6 months per level. So that would mean you could, whatever you're doing today for revenue per employee, we think with AI properly applied, you could double that in 2 years. So another stake in the ground. Love to engage with everybody on that, and yeah, lots to talk about here and unpack.
I think the other thing about the timeline when you're putting that in place is what else is going to happen in those 24 months. We talked already at the beginning that in the last 6 months and how I'm personally using AI in my team compared to what I thought I would be at the beginning of this year is different. So, you're also going to need to be quite agile with that plan and, move with whatever is coming out within that period of time, and the lessons and learnings and other things that you see going on in other consulting agencies or within the business. I think also with this order here is reflective of a lot of consulting firms that I'm talking to. If you think about that level one, getting your firm's data in order, a lot of consulting firms I'm talking to, their separate teams are doing their own thing. So we've kind of, lots of them have moved from level 0, where some people in the organization have got logins and they're doing things. So a lot of the consultancies I'm talking to, they might be in a position where, they've got company logins to Claude or OpenAI or whatever systems that they're using. So they've kind of got that set up, and they've tasked each of their teams with AI initiatives. So, if you're looking at your sales team or your delivery team, like what can you be doing with your team to make that better? Running some systems. So then when you move through to level 2, that AI sees the whole firm and how it's directed. It is moving away from, we've got our teams working on their own initiatives, and then sort of how do you bring that together? And I think that like that level 1 to level 2 is probably what most companies at the moment that I'm talking to of a SME size are grappling with, of how to do that. Going through the level 1, getting your data in order. So how can we do things? And then getting it directed into a whole value chain before you really move into agents.
Yeah, we're getting some interesting questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to
Yes. Yeah,
jump
that's a
into a
great
few of
idea.
those now.
I think we
So,
should.
okay, one I see from John is a great question, which is, what do you think about rather than just doubling revenue and profits from an AI native firm, reducing costs to customers, undercutting your competition, and slowly dominating your own space instead? So great question. I think this goes back to what kind of firm are you? Are you a premium firm that has sort of the like really scarce, high value services in the space, or are you more of a commodity commonly available, but you execute it better than anyone else? You can do it at a lower cost than anyone else. And personally, I am not good at the second one. I have never been good at the like out execute everybody on cost. I always want to build a better service that is more scarce and more differentiated. And so, but I think every founder, every leader, and every firm kind of has a fork in the road they have to pick. Are we, differentiated premium play? Are we excellent execution and we're more of a cost play? So depending which you are, I think AI can support both. And and I think that's a absolutely valid way to think about it is I think, and I also think the same techniques would help both, which is really understanding the value you're delivering, understanding your business process and what your team is required to do to get there, and then figuring out how much of that can be done with AI. Um, but I'm gonna personally always be biased towards how can I do something more that nobody else could do, and others will be better than me at how do we do this more efficiently, more cost effectively, and win that way. So I'm done what your take is on that.
I agree. And I think there's a lot of talk as well around like value-based pricing. So, especially for a lot of consulting firms that are used to quoting an hourly rate. So like there's a real, what a fantastic slide. Thank you. Increasing capacity and selling outcomes. It's sort of like, and I think a good place to start is how do you get a chunk that normally, like how quickly can you get to value for your customer? So if you think about, for example, say like a consulting engagement for a software company, if it's often, well, it takes a big chunk of time for us to get to a point where they see value, to really get something in front of them. How quickly can you automate or fix price that part so that against your competitors, people have confidence that they're going to see value straight away? Um, I think that's an interesting problem for consultancies to solve.
I think this selling outcomes, it's a little bit of a holy grail
Mm.
that I don't know if anyone ever fully gets there. I don't know, some have, but it's really difficult. And so I think a lot of firms will increase their team capacity and increase the output and the quality of what they can do before they can fully flip to selling outcomes. And we were sort of, when I was running Nexient, we got to partially selling outcomes, meaning we would take the cost of the team and give like a 10 or 15% discount, and then ask for a 15 or 20% kicker if we could meet some very concrete, measurable goal. So we're gonna, if we're working in e-commerce, we're gonna raise your conversion rate by 5 points. And if we do that over a certain period of time, then you'll pay us a kicker. But what you often get into is then the company that you're working for says, well, but we also changed three other things. How do we know you changed the conversion rate? Maybe it was these other, and it gets very murky very quickly. So it has to be concise, it has to be measurable, and it ideally has to be separate from other activities happening. Um,
A couple of other questions to jump onto in the chat here. We've got one from Matt talking about imagine, the biggest fear, imagining that some of the other consulting firm leaders is that clients think AI can do what we do. And whether it can or not doesn't seem to matter because clients don't always understand, I'm reading into here that the back end of what goes on in an agency or went through. So, and I mean, I'm reading into this map, but an example is like, well, I can just code a website. Can't I just vibe code that now and whip that up? And I think the answer to that is, doing some work in the same way you would around your value prop to get really clear to those answers of things like security. I think the other thing is at the moment, AI needs to take a brief, right? So the experience of understanding, like really teasing out what you want that to be, is still very important. And so I think an answer there is encouraging your team, as well as looking at for gains in AI, to get really clear on the messaging of why us, why we still matter, and having all of your team singing from the same song sheet, especially your sales and your delivery team. That's going to be really important that they're able to answer those questions uh, and articulate that to customers, to articulate your value, because the value will have changed a little bit than it would have 3 years ago when they were describing that. I don't know if you have another take on that, Mark.
A couple, yeah, quick ones. One, somebody I was on a webinar with said, if only I had time to take advantage of all these, to learn all these time-saving technologies that are coming out. We're all a little bit overwhelmed by the new tool that came out this week, and it's really hard to learn them all. Your clients have this same pain, so if you know those tools, I think actually in the next few years, there's more work to do to help them adopt a lot of this stuff that's come out because they just don't have the time to do it. That's kind of one. And two, I think in the very long run, what consultants are often doing is being the outside expert who can help drive change that everybody inside the company knows they need, but they can't drive it because they're in the group, they're in the team, and they just need an outsider to come in and tell them probably what they already know but aren't articulating and help them really change what they're doing. So I think there's some of these core things like change and trust that outside experts bring to the party that they don't go away. And if anything, you need even more of that in this world of AI. So I think, focusing in on how you can help clients in this world, yeah, I just think there's more work actually to be done rather than less.
Another question here from Shannon about how do you manage teaching your young consultants how to do the thinking so they can understand the fundamentals of our work and delivering to clients if AI is making them more efficient, but sometimes that's where the learning for our team is. And this is such a good point, Shannon. I think this is a really interesting one. I was at a conference the other day, hearing from people about what they were doing around AI, and a company was like, they were saying that they weren't hiring juniors anymore. And they blatantly said, they were like, and that's a problem. We understand, because where will the seniors be if the juniors don't exist? But they're just kicking that can down the road. And I think this will be a shift for all industries. And another one is lawyers. My understanding is that, like, think about all the grunt work that young lawyers had to do of like really reading all these documents and highlighting. It's just not there anymore. So but that's where you learn. That's where you really, earn your stripes across there. And so agree, I think that will be part of a problem to solve. How do you bring young people up or more junior people or consultants into a business without them having to really get into it and learn? And I think that will just need to be solved in another way. I think what we are used to of being like, well, you just move through these junior to senior roles and you just have to learn on the job, and therefore you just get more and more experienced. There is an opportunity to bring people up even faster, but it will be interesting. I don't think we're the only industry having that challenge at the moment, that just sort of a couple of years of grunt work gets you to a more intermediate level. You learn through your mistakes.
I think there's also an opportunity for a new kind of entry-level work, which I'd call the reality check, which is so you're gonna have junior people, and many of them will be better than we are at stitching together agents and getting them all orchestrated and getting your work to happen. But I think getting some kind of formal process where they reality check. So, maybe in the case of a lawyer, is the brief that was written by the AI and the things that are cited in it, do they all exist? Can I find these like citations? Is like somebody should do that reality check. And if it's engineering, like have you done the back of the napkin math to just say broadly, is this complicated calculation that the system has done, does it seem correct or is it obviously wrong, right? Just because it's like the wrong order of magnitude. Um, I think a lot of more senior people do that just by instinct because they've got the experience and they can kind of almost look at it and they don't even think too hard about that. Maybe that's something we need to make more explicit for juniors is what is your reality check and how did you do it? But I think that would also help them begin to really think about the bigger picture too, and own that yes, the system AI helped me get to this answer, but I'm going to stand behind it because I've checked it. Um,
Yeah, I agree. I like that one. Now, I think if we move on to another couple of slides, we've really tried to, which we've sort of in our flow, we've used in other podcasts about how does this actually show up for firms in terms of a size? What could you think between those 12 and 24 months and sort of that timeline that we laid out? And the framework we're using here, again, you look at your revenue, your FTE, your revenue per employee, and annual revenue, and how that might move along as employee revenue climbs. Really, it's about how can you potentially get the same people generating that revenue. And you can see, obviously, from a 5 to 25 climbing here in terms of what that might look like, all the way up to 100 million firm.
yeah, this is, I think, really where everybody wants to get that productivity up.
Yeah, agrees. And then coming through to sort of, again, coming back to that piece for your growth and your profitability. This is around sort of a consulting growth stack. So a metric, what are the metrics that you might be looking at across there? So we've just had a question in there. Are these numbers hypotheticals? If you just want to go back to the last slide there, please, Jacob, to have a look at that. They are hypotheticals of how we've run through this. And I think it's and maybe Mark, if you've got any more color to put into this, but it's a view of what you might be looking at. You might be looking at, if you're moving forward with AI in 24 months, what that might track. And I think really what we're focusing or looking at here is how can you get more out of your same team? Often the track has been the more you sell, the more you grow, the more you hire, more across the team. So is there an opportunity to do that with essentially your same set of people?
Yeah, and it is a hypothetical, and I think we're all going to discover together exactly how close we are on this prediction. But yeah, I think it is possible to do this with the technology.
Awesome.
This one, we're going to spend, I think, the next 8 or 9 episodes really diving into all of this. So there's quite a lot going on on this slide. It's almost like a preview of what we really want to talk about. But if you think about, if you just kind of go down and look at these different statistics or metrics that people are measuring, um, each of them, I think we could dive into and spend quite a bit of time. And so that's part of what we're hoping to do over the next number of episodes is both ourselves and bringing on folks to join us as guests, really dive into each of these and bring them to life.
And it would be really fun for us to talk about. I mean, you can see up there that we've been working on that Projectworks method. So, working with hundreds of consulting firms, often when we bring people, new customers onto our software who are growing firms, a lot of times we get questions saying, well, what's the best way to do this? How, what can I expect to see, and what are the metrics across my business that I should really be focused on? Often when a customer comes onto Projectworks, it might be a handful of these they're already really across, but some of them they just haven't needed to be laser focused on quite yet in their business. But then when you get, the way you report or a new piece of software and those become forefront, you can really see that, in your metrics, and then you can begin to track, learn, grow, optimize across there. So I think it comes back to a little bit about what we were saying at the beginning. AI is going to be incredibly transformative for how everybody works. But at our core, we believe still at this stage of the game, there are metrics that still matter. And it's going to be about choosing the ones that you really think that you are going to be able to change or get ahead of the game with the use of a technology like AI. This is a pretty cool slide. I like this one, thinking about how that works. Where for this one, for Projectworks, how we're thinking about this, we're thinking about it like an ecosystem of how you use that. And the way I've been looking at this slide, let's really start with the middle there where it says system of record. And this is what we think about for Projectworks. It's really all the way from selling through the analytics. So the way you do your proposals, your pipeline, your statements of work, then you execute your projects through budget management, you operate them through your resource managing in your time, and then that gives you all of those analytics, like those metrics of your dashboards and reporting. That is at core, the running of your business. And then the top here, we've got a system of action. So this is the evolution that we can move with AI. For Projectworks, for us, that is Kia, which is our agentic interface that gives us agents so that you can have a look, ask a project agent on how your projects are going. I love the truth teller there, which kind of alludes to what you're talking about really with Mark, like identifying those real honest truths rather than you having to have a look at that and use experience. How can you wrap that up to be like, you should be looking at this. Why hasn't this needle moved across there? So you've got the Projectworks systems, you've got the system of action across there. You've got those native integrations, which, let's be honest, were revolutionary years ago, that I could integrate with all of my accounting systems and my CRMs and my, Outlook. But then also wrapped around here is the Projectworks MCP server. And for anyone who hasn't been using those yet, again, this is probably a term that's really come up and coming around in the last few months. Suddenly it went from no one asking me about to everyone asking me about it. This is how you then really connect up your personal AI assistants with anything that you're using. If you're a big user of Claude, this is how you'd also plug that into the system there. So I think this is a nice thing of like, it's just that, you've got your core, but it's like, it just keeps wrapping around. There's just more and more that you can wrap up to get more information.
Yeah, maybe just a couple of quick examples to bring it to life a little bit. So Kia would be the agent inside of Projectworks, and you could imagine one example might be that your client delayed the start date on a project by a week. This used to happen to me all the time. It's quite painful actually, but um, to make at least the operational piece of it a little bit easier, you could go into Kia with the prompt and say, the Acme project has now moved out 1 week on start date, and Kia could adjust your whole schedule and resource plan accordingly. So, just thinking about being able to do those kinds of tasks through a prompting interface and hopefully in, one move rather than having to go through and do it yourself. So that's one example. MCP servers into your favorite, whether it's Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever you're using. You can imagine your favorite note taker listens to your stand-up. You can take the transcript, put it into your platform. It could, through the MCP server, maybe it notices some time allocations that it could make, so it could start to fill in people's timesheets for them. Or maybe it notices something similar to what I said, which is we need to add some resource to this project. And so it could change the resourcing plan potentially. So just a couple examples, I think, over the next, few quarters as we really work through this together. There's just going to be lots and lots of rich examples of how to make the back office work easier and faster. And we're really excited about it. And just as Dominique said, we want to get everything from proposals to payments and everything in between in the system and make it just really whatever you need to run the company and to take it back to profitable growth.
Absolutely. There's a bit of a last slide here is if you are not using Projectworks and you're keen to see what's out there, what's coming for us, please let us know. Jump on the website. You can get a demo. If you're a customer and you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'd love to get access to this, also jump in there, reach out to our support email or any of your CSMs, and we can work through getting you on beta tests. Really, really love feedback from early customers. You can imagine that as we've been talking about, we've got some of the stuff already out there. We've got some quick follow-ups. There's going to be tons of stuff coming out. So especially if you're a customer, we'd love to get your feedback and get you across what's coming out and get some, users and early adopters across our platform and what we're bringing. Great that you talked about the growth stack, Mark, because we will be back in 2 weeks exploring the first metrics from the consulting growth stack, which is cost per proposal and how AI can help you win new clients in business with far less non-billable time involved. As being a sales leader many times in consulting firms, man, that billable resource for getting proposals across is no joke. Often it would people off jobs, tons of time, which some consultancies like to track, some like to just put over here, because sometimes it can be overwhelming to think about how much you put into proposals that you potentially may or may not win. So I think that will be a really cool one to see, the cost per proposal and how AI can help you win new clients and projects. That's us for today. We're almost at time.
Yeah, I feel like we're probably not answering all the questions. So for those that we didn't, we can probably follow up offline. I don't know if we have time to get any more in the actual session here, or if we want to just follow up on them.
Yeah, let's have a quick scroll. We've got a couple of minutes here, so let's have a look. A couple of people are asking about the recording. Absolutely. Recordings will be sent out, but also we publish all of these recordings on our YouTube channel. Is the easiest and best place to have a look for that, especially so that you can see that and see the slides. We've got someone else here talking about blended delivery models where they partner closely with client teams and collaborate as if just they're one team. I think there's also just some really good, some questions, but also some really good comments. So actually very cool to see people chatting back and forth in the chat there. That's awesome. That's what we're hoping to do with these sorts of sessions, is sort of bring people together there and share ideas. So thank you to everybody who jumped in and put their 2 cents in the chat.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Those blended delivery models can be a great way to teach your client how to work. They would often ask us to coach them, and we would sort of say we're not really coaches, we're more practitioners. So we would actually just find the best way to teach them is to do the work with them. And then they would get the pattern and they'd get the motion and get better and better. So that can be really powerful.
Yeah. And I like that. What a great note to end on. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. You can find Mark and I on LinkedIn. We always like to make new friends. So please reach out and make sure to subscribe to the Project Work podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.